What's up, everybody? Andrew Clear from the F1 podcast, bringing you season 5, episode 21. Wow, episode 21 already
21.
of the F1 podcast. I am here with Jonathan Ricci. Jono, we are 21, well, we're on our 20th episode of the season. It has been quite an interesting ride in season 5. But first and foremost, how has your summer been?
Summer's been good. I mean, it's kind of been a nice break a little bit. I'm going to be honest, away from motorsports for a bit, for a couple of days. That's what I think a lot of people really needed, especially with how this season has gone and the dominance of McLaren. I think people want to just kind
It's
of
boring,
rest.
isn't it?
Well, I wouldn't say boring per se. I think that if that's a story we want to start off, like surprises so far of the season, I think yes, we knew that the McLaren was really fast, and we knew the drivers are going to be very competitive. To the level of, I guess, dominance that they've done so far has been like amazing to watch, and especially from how the team has been from a couple of years ago. Um, I think the question for me is, okay, so now we have 10 races left. The focus is going to be on the Oscar, Lando, because they've probably been openly talking about how are they going to handle those two going in. And we've seen some spats throughout the season. But that is definitely my first thing to see is I would talk about is the surprises of the season. Well, not so, is how dominant that McLaren has been. And whatever it's been qualifying, whether if it's been the race pace, winning with like 30 seconds, I'll start with McLaren. I think that's been my first big surprise is the amount of dominance they've had.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the Mercedes slash Red Bull S level of domination that this is now going to become this year. Especially like, with 2026 on the horizon, I don't anticipate McLaren losing a race for the next 10 Grand Prix. I just think they're just too fast. They're going to have too good of a car. Teams are going to be focusing on next year now because there really is no point in the constructors to try and fight McLaren whatsoever. So I think you know what, the final 10 races of the year, having that battle between Lando and Oscar will be really good for the sport in terms of just storylines and keeping people entertained and watching throughout the year for the final 10 races. You know what I mean? But I guess my question is, Ricci, I don't know what it is about McLaren dominance. It's just I find it kind of boring because I think in a way Mercedes when they had Lewis like there was just a level of swagger there or a level of just charisma that Mercedes and Toto had with regards and then Lewis being Lewis obviously, right? And then with Max these past few years, just the cockiness in that case, still like confidence and cockiness of Red Bull. You kind of like tune in on it for that and the record-setting season. I don't know. I just find McLaren boring in a way too, just because they're just very much like, oh, we can't fight. Oh, be nice, sort of idea, right? No, I want some battles. I want some brute on battles in the racing, and I'm hoping these next 10 races provide kind of that level of drama, let's say.
And like this is a good point that you talked about. Yeah, like maybe you also have Oscar Piastri when he wins races. He's very monotone, very quiet. You don't really see much. And then Lando's kind of the same, but not to the level of Oscar. He's trying to avoid breaking trophies. I think that's the new thing. Um, yeah, and that is going to be a question kind of going into the last 10 races is how is the team going to handle the stress of the drivers' championship? And like who in the end of the day are they're obviously gonna let them battle. Probably it's not gonna be like a team orders kind of thing. And I hope Zach Brown lets them battle because I think that would be great. And how close is like the margin of errors in a couple of races this season where one weekend it was all Lando, the other weekend it was all Oscar. So
Well, and the thing too is like if you're Zach Brown, you're kind of in a weird spot where you want them to battle it out between the two of them, but to a point where it's not like you're creating animosity between the two team members, kind of like a Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton sort of, fight that was there in 2016. And remember back in 2016, they actually switched teams halfway through the race so that they kind of try to keep that level of camaraderie
yeah.
at Mercedes. And I don't think that's the case that you'll have it's currently right now at McLaren, I think the camaraderie's like very high with regards to that, but there is a chance where it can might reach that level of rivalry, which in a way is good to have a form of rivalry between the two drivers because there's a way to push each other, but then you don't want it to go above and board so that it negatively affects the team, right? So it's going to be a balancing act for Andrea Stella, for Zach Brown in these last 10 races, I think, because that'll mold the way for the years to come.
Yeah, well, I think you speaking at they're both relatively young drivers. They still have their years on their contracts. They're signed for next year already as well. So it's like they kind of need that support coming and going into the new year with the regulations, with the 2026 regulations, with the new slot of them. And also like yeah, and in the sense that if one of them were to win the drivers' championship this weekend, I mean not this weekend, this year, they're not going to retire next year. They're going to still keep fighting as more as like, yeah, I think at that point when it was the Lewis and Nico kind of saw the animosity that came when he won that year. So he just said, you know what, I've won, I'm out. See ya, I'm going to be a sports analyst now. Um, yeah, I guess like let's kind of maybe jump to anything more surprising this season. I have here, um, I think Red Bull Racing, to be honest with you, and hear me out on this one. That second seat is been worse than in previous years. So we all used to brag on Sergio Perez on like how bad he was in that second seat. And obviously, yes, when it was round six or something like that, like in 2024, where it just kind of depleted. But Yuki Tsunoda has been not able, despite being promoted up to the second seat, been not able to figure that seat out. Liam Lawson was not able to figure out that seat, and he got the can very quickly. Um, to the level of this like how quick he was gone. Like Sergio Perez had more time, and just like Max Verstappen is literally holding this team on a thread right now. And yes, they've won at tracks where maybe it had favored them, where the elevation or just like the track itself. I think yeah, it was
Like
Japanese Grand
Suzuka, kind of
Prix
like very
and
hard to
Imola.
pass at that track, right? In
And
that
Imola,
sense.
like very not easy tracks, but maybe is more fit to the Red Bull tracks. And he's
Yeah, and again,
obviously
hard to pass in Imola too, right? Very tight, away for Max to be able to put his elbows out in that sense too. But yeah, I agree in the sense that you don't really appreciate what you have until it's gone in that sense, right? And we didn't appreciate Perez as much, considering I think the like obviously the problem that Perez had and Checo had, and what every second driver have is that your comparison is Max Verstappen, four-time world champion. Greatest driver of his generation, right? Could be greatest of all time if he stays with it. So it's hard to get to that level of greatness, right? Like Michael Jordan was the greatest basketball player of all time. He had to elevate everybody around him. Different sport, different kind of thought process. But, again, the people that he played with were not incredible in that sense. So we have to kind of think of that as well. And when you look at the performance scores, or if you look at performances overall, Checo, yeah, he was inconsistent in terms of the qualifying, but he would maintain point level finishes throughout the season. Tsunoda can't do anything in that second seed. It's like it's bad. It is just bad. He's got
eight.
10 points overall. He's being outscored by both V-carb drivers now, I believe, and it's just kind of you almost kind of question like what the hell is going on?
Yeah, and it's just like it, yeah, what is going on? And also, people are losing. I don't know if Red Bull are losing staff left, right, and center to go people to go try on different opportunities. I think I saw a map where it's like 9 out of the 10 drive F1 teams are within like I don't know if it's a 30 kilometer or 50 kilometer radius in the UK.
Yeah.
Obviously, the only one is Ferrari, and they're obviously in Italy. But I guess people are all looking for new opportunities, and they know that the car is not going to be good probably for 2026. So you had Adrian Newey, you talked about Jonathan Wheatley, you talked about others. Christian Horner, that's also another story of him being sacked in the middle of the season, which I think a lot of people were not expecting. Someone who is taking that team to great heights, and then all of a sudden things are not going well. And you know what? The Red Bull team decided, you know what? We want to go into 2026 with with new philosophy and new approach. And it might
And
and it just like what I said in previous episodes when Michael Schumacher was at Ferrari, a good example. Maybe Red Bull is going to struggle for the next couple of years, and that's why the talks about Max Verstappen and going over to Mercedes have amplified this year because that's also another story in itself that like every weekend I was like, is this going to be it? Is George Russell going to make the move, or is he or which yacht is Max Verstappen on this weekend and
yeah.
where?
Yeah, it sounds like Max is going to stay through 2026, but 2027 now becomes the question. And it's kind of like, is it a right move to stay for 2026? Because could that be a year where they just completely are terrible with regards to the engine battle, right? And that's another year lost in terms of the campaign of potential winning World Drivers' Championships there. So it's like, sunk costs versus potential losses at this point. I don't know. I think Red Bull needed to keep Max to stay relevant for 2026 and onwards because to be honest with you, if Max Verstappen was not in a Red Bull, they would be bottom of the table from the drivers. Because like I mean, Alpine would be scoring more points than Red Bull right now.
It's I like it's not so much like I don't want to say it's like the Red Bull Racing. It's more like the Max Verstappen team right now. If he's got
It
90% of the
really is
points.
Verstappen.com racing in an F1 setting.
I guess what other surprises have you been what other surprises have really surprised you this year?
I really think what surprised me, I guess, is maybe how much I underestimated the change is Lewis Hamilton in his performances at Ferrari. I thought this was like a guy that was going to elevate them to another level when he went. Um, but I think there is uh, in a way, you underestimate how much of a culture shock it is to change a team, right? Especially going to a different country in that sense. I mean, McLaren and Mercedes, both UK outfits. He was there for I don't know how many, like 20 years total combined. Same engine, right? You get to know the car, even if it's the same engine, you get to know it. There was a little bit of a curve to Mercedes when he first went there in 2013. But I mean, it was one season and they still won races there. And for Lewis that he was able to dominate from 2014 onwards to 2021 in that sense. But I just, the way he was so down on himself in Hungary, saying he was just useless. And I mean, like, that is not how a seven-time world champion should talk about his driving. And he seems so dejected. And I don't know if that's based on the culture shock and the change of how teams are run, especially Ferraris run differently. We've seen it in the past, but yeah, just mind blowing that he's so dejected about his performance that it's now eating at his performance.
And like I remember when the season started, though that photo shoot that he did outside Maranello with like that old, I don't know what the model of that Ferrari was, and just like the awe and the glow, and then him putting on the red jacket the first time. Like it gives you goosebumps when you have someone that is like the seven-time world champion to join the most decorative F1 team. And then it's like the season has been the complete opposite, minus the Chinese Grand Prix sprint race win that he won. While that is probably not in terms of you have to compare a race win to a sprint race win, obviously very different. But yeah, like I think that's the biggest shock, and I think he's sitting. I think is he sitting sixth in the track of the season right now? I think I have him at yeah six, and that's not normally where he's ever been. I mean, this is like Hungary, he came P12, the first non-points that he's got all season, other than the disqualification at China in round two with Charles Leclerc. And just, yeah, the comparison between him and Charles, like Charles has like five podiums, and then yeah, he's got nothing to show for it. And yeah, he's been more public about his frustrations and just I don't know if it's not having Bono there or just like the culture of just what it's like to drive for Ferrari. I have said in previous episodes, it's gonna have to take a couple of years. This is like Schumacher took a couple of years to win
Well,
his first one.
and
Yeah.
he's kind of taking a Schumacher-esque approach in terms of developing the car. Schumacher was very hands-on in the development, working with his engineers late into the night, and Lewis is kind of doing it in his style, where he's been developing documents for Ferrari throughout the season, kind of making his assessments on, how to succeed. Like he mentioned that, like Ferrari does have the internal elements to win a world championship. It's just a matter of being able to put it together
Yeah.
in a cohesive manner. And I think that's what Lewis is trying to do with his documents, with the development of it, and a lot of the meetings he's having with like John Eklund, the Ferrari chairman, Benedetto, and just kind of like with Fred Vasseur, just trying to put everybody in line to make sure that we can be cohesive and win as a team. So maybe that bodes well for next year. I don't know. We can't tell until we start next season off, but I'm hoping that Lewis can kind of just stop being dejected and understand that this season is about building his confidence back up in the Ferrari and continuing maybe good performances. It doesn't necessarily have to be wins, doesn't necessarily have to be podiums, but let's try and score as many points as he feels as possible, so that he can start to build back more confidence in that car.
Total Wolf has always talked about how Lewis Hamilton always has this drive in him in the second part of the season, where I think he's been statistically always better in the second half or even stronger. So I'm hopeful that this break will create that level and just the reassurance from Fred Vasseur and the Italian media and him. Maybe this is his first year understanding what it's like to drive for Ferrari and understanding the media that comes with the Tifosi. Yeah, I think that's definitely another most surprising in a bad way I have is Alpine is just how bad that car is to the level that I've not it's been shocking. And now that they're I think doing a Mercedes engine next year, so they're not even doing a French engine, I believe. And also like while Jack Doohan got dropped, and Gasly's trying to take that car wherever he can. Yeah, it's that's also been like I know we've talked about how bad they are, but it's just like oof, it's just another level of bad.
Yeah, and it's funny because like Briatore, right? He's a guy who does not handle mediocrity very well, and they're the worst team on the grid. Now they scored the most points of any, like they're going to be the highest scoring team that may finish bottom, and I forget like how many years, but still you're finishing last, right? And that doesn't speak well, in my opinion, right? To a team like Alpine, Renault, and their history in that sense.
Yeah, so last year, Kick Sauber Ferrari scored 4 points. Williams Mercedes scored 17 points, and they're already at 20 this year.
Yeah. And if we were going to look at somebody positive, I would say that like Kick Sauber are probably to me the biggest surprise of the year.
Jonathan Wheatley, took a gamble on a team that maybe a lot of people had their expectations very low. And let's be real, when they announced the Kick Sauber team, um, I think there was money, there was issues with the licensing too, the stake in Switzerland, I think, if I can remember. So like already the team was already had some bad publicity to start. But yeah, I mean, Nico Hulkenberg broke his curse of winning his first podium. Gabriel Borrella, I don't know if I'm pronouncing the last name right. He has had, started the season a little slow with some of those races, but has picked it up recently. And I think if I'm Fernando Alonso, I'm happy to have him as one of my drivers under my management team.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Bortoleto has been probably one of the, he's not been flashy, but I think he's been one of the most steady rookies of this season. Yeah, especially coming from a car that side, great to see Hulkenberg get his first ever podium in Sauber, and then just like that positive trajectory going into a new team like Audi next season
Yeah.
is going to be it's just so motivating, I think, for Kick Sauber to like then continue on, for it sets up for great success, I think, coming for the next few years, and showing that it is possible, because a lot of us just kind of threw them to the wayside and said they're going to be awful this season. So it's been really exciting, to see. Can't wait to see what Audi does next season, and see we just to see Wheatley perform well outside of the Red Bull environment is great. It's nice to see that succession as well.
Yeah, and I think probably for you is too is not only like Jonathan Wheatley is doing well and he's very happy with how things are going and like wow, maybe this might have been the season for Austin Martin, and because I think everyone's probably focused on 2026. Probably Adrian Newey is probably cooking up a storm in that
Oh,
factory with that car. So
And that's why, honestly, I want, it sounds crazy. I always said, I
Just
want
tank.
Aston Martin to be the worst team this year in a way, just because they have enough monetary resources. It's just to give Adrian Newey all the damn time in the world in that tunnel for development, and they'll make a championship car.
Hmm.
No, and with somebody getting fired like Christian Horner in the beginning during the season, do you bring a guy like Christian Horner in to help run the outfit along with Lawrence Stroll, right? And do you recreate that connection between him and Newey that they had at Red Bull Racing for all these years? In that case, I think that might bode well. Or if you're Christian Horner, do you go to a new team like Cadillac, who
Yeah.
made some big, who just signed Valtteri Bottas in that sense, right? And to be able to, I think it's a good environment for a Horner to bring up a new starter because that's what he's used to, right? He brought Red Bull from its inception all the way to the powerhouse that it is now. And to think he could probably do that again at Cadillac and recreate that success. It'd be hilarious to see Christian Horner work with Valtteri Bottas after all of those years of rivalry.
And I think let's talk about that because I think if unless there's anything else that we want to talk about the
No.
season, um, I think there's probably one thing I will note is the new regulations in terms of public comments from the drivers. I feel like that is not talked about enough. But we can just want to make sure that that is just that's a shout out I think is important of the changes of the dynamics of how drivers are speaking or and then towards the media. But yeah, Fan Amp, and I think it is, let me just double check. Racing News 365 have broken that Valtteri Bottas has signed with Cadillac, and we talked about it's a new team, gonna probably be looking for experienced drivers. Um, and everybody missed Valtteri on the grid, so we saw those kind of memes of those Cadillac, oh, I want that seat, and then it looks like it's happening. So we're waiting for I guess, the official announcement, but the reporters have already breaking the news.
Yeah, and then it's now becomes a question of who's going to take the second seat. And I read a rumor earlier this week that Sergio Perez wanted a $30 million win like bonus in his contract if he was to ever win a championship, and Cadillac rejected that offer, which I thought was, I don't know how much I want to believe that at all.
Yeah.
But it's exciting to see like Valtteri come back. He was very much, unfortunately he hadn't performed very well in Alfa Romeo for the past couple of seasons, kind of hence why he was dropped at the end of the season, or end of last season. So it's kind of but him going back to Mercedes as a reserve driver, maybe he picks back up on his winning ways that he did in a Mercedes car in terms of the level of like driving, and then now he also too is kind of like in the way that he thought with Alfa Romeo was going to be into Audi developing kind of a new team in that
Exactly.
sense. And I think it'll be exciting for him to kind of stamp his legacy with a new team. And unfortunately, poor guy, because of the last race that he had in 2024 at Abu Dhabi when he collided with Kevin Magnussen, his first race, he's receiving a five-place grid penalty in 2026. So he has to
Can't even
serve a
catch a
five.
break on his
You
first
know, he's
day
going to
in
serve a
2026.
five-place grid penalty to start his 2026 campaign.
Time will tell with when Valtteri Bottas, and yeah, we'll be I think we'll break the news once that kind of once that goes officially live. Is there anything we kind of want to wrap up this season, not the season, but the midterm thoughts?
F1 fans out there, just pay attention and enjoy this battle that McLaren are going to have because, as I may have mentioned earlier, I feel like it's kind of a boring team to watch in terms of being at the top. But there is a level of entertainment and racecraft that's between Oscar and Lando that subtly I think is going to make for a great championship fight down the road. And, it would be kind of fun if they were tied going into the final race of the year,
Yeah, just like Abu Dhabi 2021 it all over again. That would be kind of nice to
right?
experience the
I think that would
yeah,
go, and I think that would end the 2020, like this set of regulations off really well. I think just kind of riding off into the sunset with a team, like the final day battle would be really cool, set the standard for 2026. And then, I'm excited to see. where the dominoes fall with regards to Cadillac's second driver. And, there's got to be some re-signings coming up as well for Mercedes because I don't believe, like, technically Russell and Antonelli are finalized contracts yet,
Yeah,
but more so that's what it's looking like. I don't think we're going to be seeing the silly season that we could have had. I mean, if Max went to Mercedes, the season would have just been wide open in terms of silliness. I think it's going to be very tamed, unfortunately. So that's why I say enjoy the final 10 races and pay close attention to how McLaren
exactly.
fight for that. And that's what I think what we'll focus on in these final 10 races as well.
So next week it will be race week. Can't believe we're saying that. It will be we will preview the Dutch Grand Prix, I believe, on Wednesday. We have a special guest. I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna keep it a little quiet. I also want to give a shout out to Laps with Laura for coming on the pod earlier
Great
this month.
episode.
Thank you, thank
Loved
you.
it. That was a lot of fun
Yes, yeah,
listening
she
to.
really enjoyed it, and I think our fans really enjoyed like a different perspective, and we
Yes.
appreciate that. Two things just want to mention: Alex Palou clinched his fourth IndyCar Series championship and his third consecutive title for driving for Chip Ganassi Racing. He secured the championship at Portland International Raceway. We also will have F1 Academy be picking up at Zandvoort next week. For during the Dutch Grand Prix, so we'll see Nicole Haverda race again, and so we got a lot to talk about for next week's episode. So thank you all for tuning in to this week's episode of the F1 podcast. I'm Richie, that's Andrew. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you next week as we preview the Dutch Grand Prix. Thanks, everyone.